So we're going to do a very quick panel because we have to finish in 15 minutes. But this is actually a sort of fun panel. I was just talking with Mary Morris and saying that she should have been on this panel as well, because this is a panel of people who, like Eric, got their PhD from Stanford. And well, that's the key. Yeah. It actually made me wonder how many people in this room have their PhDs from Stanford. Oh, so we've got most of them up here. Yeah. No, yeah, we've got a couple, and we've got some PhD from Stanford generators in here as well. But anyway, so we're gonna. What I was hoping is it's actually really interesting to have three people with three very different career paths, all having gotten their PhD at Stanford and worked with Eric, and it sort of makes me think about all of the different ways that Eric has had impact. Everybody's gone out and come to MSR or gone out to faculty positions or gone to Microsoft or Google or other places, and I thought it would be fun we could just start and maybe have everybody share their journey from Stanford, and then I'll ask a couple of questions beyond that. So do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Mehran Sahami. I'm back at Stanford now as a professor there. And in thinking about kind of this panel, something came up, if the slides are live, was I went back to do a little bit of excavating. And in the excavations I found, well, hopefully we'll get the slides up. They'll come up. I'll show you the actual, so there's the picture. Here's the actual magazine. And if you can't read the date on there, let me blow it up for you. Maybe the clicker's just not working.
Oh, it's up. Oh.
That could be. It's from 1997. So that's actually when I was at MSR about 20 years ago and happened to get this magazine while I was there about inside Microsoft's plan. The title's a little inflammatory. Bill Gates is hiring the world's smartest scientists. His goal, control the future. Really, I mean, I'm sure everyone here knows the goal was to try to make the world a better place through research and development that could actually help people. One of the reasons I got this magazine is because if you actually open it up to page 84, so if we could have the next slide, you find this fine picture of Jack Breeze, Eric Horvitz, and David Heckerman in the decision theory group because, yeah, no Homer office is complete without a giant Bayes net floating in the middle of it. And if we can have the next animation, just so you can see the young svelte figures that they are. But this was the fine group of people I had a chance to work with, and Sue Dumais was there as well. And it was just an amazing, transformative experience because at the time, 20 years ago, there was still a lot of work in AI that was very heuristic. And one of the things that was great about working in this group with this group of people, beyond the fanboy experience of being there and being, I knew Sue from her LSI work. I knew David from his Learning Bayes network. I knew Eric from the work on Lumiere that no one had mentioned, which is an amazing system. So, it was a chance to work with these people who were luminaries in the field and get a chance to really do more rigorous work in AI, but with the goal of actually building something that was real that could be deployed, which I think is a hallmark of the kind of work that was being done in that group that Eric, Sue, and others really helped push forward. And so if we can have the next slide, one of the things that I think is interesting is that the paths with Eric kept intersecting. So now 10 years later, this is in 2008 at the AAAI conference. If we can have the next animation, if you zoom in on Eric's badge, you'll notice something there. So if I can do a little bit of magic and do a little bit of image recognition, if we can have the next animation, go back one. You'll actually, if we can go back one slide, you'll actually see that his badge says president because this is the AAAI that he was president at. And a lot of people want to talk to him. He gave this amazing address, and he takes time out to connect former interns. So there's Andreas, who gave one of the talks in the morning. This was an opportunity where Eric introduced the two of us, took a bunch of time to talk, and it's just indicative of the kind of person that he is, that no matter how distinguished, how much stature he has in the field, he takes time to continue to reconnect with people and people who are much more junior and still working their way through the field. But at this time, MSR I think was clearly very well established. A lot of people wanted to go there, and it was also I think one of the things that kind of ties back to something that's going on now. It was around this time that as AAAI president, Eric started the Asilomar conference to really think about social implications of AI, which clearly have come to the fore these days, but it shows you sort of how much in advance he was thinking. If we're going to have the next slide. So this is in 2016 at the ACM Awards. That might have gotten cut off at the top. It's not American Country Music Association Awards. This is, the Association for Computing Machinery. This is where, Eric won the Alan Newell Research Award, and he takes time out at that event to get together a bunch of colleagues, because that's the kind of person he is, right? Like the event like this is not just a one-off or a special case. This is just indicative of the kind of thing Eric has done over time. And you can see Sue there, Yuri Leskovic is there, Chuck Thacker. I'm on the end. I'll show you one final picture. This is us in 2018, actually, just a couple months ago. A chance to reconnect once again. And if you show the animation, I will make 2 points. One is Eric's grown more distinguished over time. If you do the next animation, I've just grown over time, which is more in the horizontal direction. But the thing is that I think we're due 2028. We have a date, Eric, to take another picture. Every decade we need to have one. But I think, to tie this back to how these intersections have been happening is one of the things that, I've been very excited with to work on now is this notion of ethics in AI. And I'm working together with a couple colleagues from the political science department, one who's a philosopher, moral philosopher, one who's a public policy expert, and then me as the technical person to think about training students or educating students around AI and ethics. And a lot of the things that, the kinds of things we're thinking about are things that have been developed over time by folks like Eric, who had the Asilomar conference, had the 100-year study in AI, is now leading a team at Microsoft, which is this meeting itself has been another connection. We need to be in touch about the kind of work that's going on. We're going to have some invited speakers for the class. But just an indication of how over time careers continue to intersect and the kind of impact that Eric has had repeatedly to take the time to be able to connect people, and the ideas which were really early on but created a foundation that people could build on over time. So with that, I'll turn it over.
Sure. Eric has had a huge impact in my life. I think I first met him when I was a PhD student at Stanford, thinking about ways in which we could use computational modeling to bring some of the insights in psycholinguistics and social linguistics to building conversational systems. And at the time, I didn't think people in computer science really cared, but I had taken a course with Daphne Kohler and talked to her about, potentially leveraging Bayesian techniques for this, and she said, "Oh, you have to meet Eric Horvitz." And so she connected me with Eric, and we just hit it off. I mean, I was really, really impressed by the fact that he was trying to bring in all of these insights from multiple disciplines to make systems much more intelligent and, useful for users. And I think in many ways, I think everyone would agree that Eric is a visionary. And a lot of people have experienced Eric potentially saying, "Oh, I had thought of that 10 years ago." I think that that's awesome. I think that he did think about a lot of these things way ahead of people. And even now, I don't feel that, we've really taken a lot of the insights that he had about tightly coupling, the machine learning with user interface and really bringing in the insights that other disciplines have to creating compelling experiences. I don't think we still have that. When I started working with Eric after I got my PhD, I joined his team. We were working on the Bayesian receptionist. I'm still working on the Bayesian receptionist in many ways. And I'll give a very quick recap of my career history. It's actually very simple. I've spent 15 years at Microsoft Research, and then I left, and now I am leading advanced development for Siri. And we're still working on a receptionist. And I still think that in many ways, a lot of the insights that Eric had about thinking about all of these contextual factors, like one of the big things, another big thing that he focused on way ahead of everybody else was like attention, like really trying to model the user's attention and figuring out, when's the best time to, bring out notifications? How should we do it? And thinking about it from a computational standpoint, I mean, at the time he was really big into decision theory. I think, he's agnostic about that, probably. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Okay, maybe not. Okay. Okay, but I think he was really focused on trying to create these compelling experiences, bringing in, interweaving machine learning, UI, UX, and, the humanities. I feel like a lot of the work that I still do now really harks back to that time. And I think the other thing, just kind of in terms of the way Eric works and collaborates with people, I just had a ton of fun with him when I was an intern. We used to hang out at night. We used to have long, deep conversations. Like he was a grad student. It was kind of weird. He was already distinguished, but I felt like we chatted about all kinds of weird topics, and but we had a lot of fun. And as we built the receptionist, I remember there was a lot of laughter, and he has that bubbly energy about him when you collaborate with him. He makes the dullest ideas into really exciting, futuristic things. And I think it was very infectious. I caught that. And even now, as I'm building out our division and the team, I make sure we don't have any jerks, that we have a lot of fun. I just remember all of the great times that we had, Eric and I, and I'm trying to bring that back to wherever I work. And so, yeah, those are all the ways in which Eric has influenced my life, and I hope that, he had this vision of giving everybody a receptionist long before, Siri came into the market and changed things. I think we haven't gotten there yet, and I think it's great that he had that, and he pushed an entire generation of people like myself to just continually focus on making that vision into a reality. So thank you, Eric.
So my name is Urszula Chajewska, and right now I'm at Microsoft, but as it was already mentioned, I did my PhD at Stanford, and I drifted very quickly towards probabilistic systems. And I found them very interesting, but somewhat dry. And it wasn't until I discovered Eric's work on applications of these systems in medicine that I actually found what I really wanted to do. And I did my thesis on extending these systems to treat the utility of the patient as a first-class citizen, just like we treat events as knowable only to some extent, and we capture our uncertainty over events. We can similarly treat utilities as something that we can have uncertainty over. And in this way, we can bring this was mid-90s, so bringing the patient into the medical decision-making was a new concept. It wasn't like it is now. But that was, in a sense, a pioneering work in trying to bring the patient and take their utility into account when trying to decide on the course of action in medicine. And that experience stayed with me, even though I tried doing different things after graduating. And but I did a couple of medical startups that didn't make me rich, but they made me even more interested in different types of applications of AI in medicine, both in text applications and in probabilistic systems. And right now I'm at Microsoft, and even though healthcare is nowhere near in my job description, I am actually doing one project with philanthropies right now that is medical in nature, and one with MSR that is also about the medical domain. So I found ways to continue that passion.
Great. So in the interest of time, we're going to do just one last close out. And I was thinking you've talked a lot about how Eric has influenced you, and also sort of thinking about, I like the conversation about all the vision that Eric has had, and what do you see as an interesting new area for the future to push on? What is something unexpected that's going to happen? And while you think on that, I'm going to cheat because I was on the panel before I got roped into moderating, and I want to tell a quick little story too about something that I really value about Eric. Is one thing that I think is really inspirational about Eric that I have taken is how much he doesn't see limits. And I think a lot of the reason that he has these inspirational perspective and is able to really be visionary and see out into the future is because he doesn't think, oh, I can't do this, or that's not going to work, or do I have the right data set for that? And I was actually wondering, of the interns here, how many people stayed on for an extra internship after their own? Yeah, I mean, and I just think Eric, there's never any boundaries with Eric. He just figures out how to make it happen and what new thing to do. The only reason I didn't end up staying on for an extra internship was because I had to go home and have a baby. But so anyway, if you have kind of a vision of what you think the future is going to look like, to share.
Well, I'll throw out one idea. It's a little dark, but I think it sort of lays. I've heard this phrase before that, in some sense, it was applied to computer scientists, but I think it applies more specifically to folks working in AI. That computer scientists now are like physicists in 1945. That we have created something that's very powerful. And that we do have some moral responsibility for it. And if we just worry about the technological aspects of it, we are not doing it justice. And I think, Eric saw that 10 years ago, actually more than 10 years ago, and has already been pushing people to think about this. But I think that's one of the big challenges that happens in the next 10 years is that there will, I really hope this doesn't happen, but I think there will probably be something that raises public consciousness about real dangers of AI more than just the sort of philosophical discussions that have happened. And that's the place where the bright light shines on our community to say, what are you really doing about this? And some people are starting to flicker that light already, because there are some things that are going on that are not so AI related, that are a little bit more around attention economy and around personal information. But as AI gets put into more systems, it's only a matter of time until there is some AI that is responsible for something like this. And so I think the more time we actually spend thinking about that now as a community, the better we will do to avert things like that in the future, or be able to at least have a compelling reason for continuing to do what we do when something bad happens.
I think Eric actually would have a really nice answer to that, and it's something that he had been pushing a long time ago, and it's augmented intelligence. I remember long time ago when the possibility of AI really as a threat was not a thing. Eric was talking a lot about augmented intelligence, that we should be using AI and machine learning to augment all of our abilities. And, in some ways, that's actually the position that Apple has on AI. That's kind of our formal position. And I think if you look back at some of his work, even before he joined Microsoft, I still have this vision of this video in my head of him being like a surgeon. He does have an MD. Right, and did anybody see this? Where he has all of these goggles, and it's helping him to do surgery, and it's pointing at the right things to focus on, and helping him, as a surgeon. I think it was a vision video. Was it a vision?
It was a working system.
It was a working system. Okay, that's even better. That's even more impressive.
DARPA funded by a startup.
Yes, and I think that's all about having the power of AI and machine learning, improve your abilities to do the things that you need to do. And in fact, I would say that probably for the future, this is what we're going to see more and more of. We're going to see much more intelligent devices that augment our abilities with AI in them. And I think especially for the virtual assistant space, whether it's Siri or Cortana, I think we're going to have this intelligence all around us, just all the things around us be imbued with this intelligence that's keenly aware of all of our preferences, but also trying to help us to improve our abilities and hopefully with some ethical guidelines, not doing the things that could, ruin society and, violate our privacy and so forth.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks. And Urszula?
I think we are still not using AI consistently in many disciplines, and as I am focused on medicine, that comes to mind. There is a lot more research in medicine than when I started, but these are still isolated pockets. Some researcher got interested in a certain disease and got their hands on a certain data set, and they mined that data and discovered something interesting. But we are not doing this nearly enough and nearly in a systematic way that would allow us to mine the ton of observational data that we have. And the medical community, a lot of researchers are still very suspicious of observational data, and for good reason, because it can be very misleading, and the findings not necessarily are causal, and there are all the caveats that come with it. But there are so many medical disciplines where you have clinical studies with 10 controls and 10 patients in the treatment group. They are showing very little, and we cannot afford to discard all this observational data and not mine them. And even if we are not taking the findings as complete and conclusive, they can generate hypotheses, and we can then design new clinical studies to prove some hypotheses that we discovered in observational data. And I would like to see this process being more consistent. And I imagine that would apply to other disciplines as well. So it's probably not medicine. I know it is the case in medicine, but I imagine that it's similar in environmental science and other sciences.
Great, thank you. Let's thank the panelists and thank Eric. Thank you.